Happy Monday, traders. This is Tanner with Charting Options. Today is January 31st, the final day of January's trading month, and I am here to discuss our two day trade ideas for this fine Monday. What was a slight gap up, not really, more of a flat open that was followed with some really strong price action to the upside pretty much right away, which made for a bit of a challenging day. Unless you were bold enough to really buy early and get long with the push higher that we saw pretty much following the first 5-10 minutes of the session, it was tough to trade at that point. Personally, I was not really bold enough to do so. I did do so by trading Apple today, but I didn't do more than that really outside of that. I tried to take Apple short as well at a different time. I tried to trade the Qs short early today, which did work out initially, but then quickly reversed to the upside. Just overall a tricky day, especially when we have just the memory of the entire month of January fresh in our minds. Coming into the session and how any sort of pop has been sold. Today was any sort of pullback was bought and in a big way. We closed really strong. The market closed at the highs of the day as it pushed into close. So with that being said, we'll see how tomorrow unfolds. Looks like the market, at least based off of how the S&P, SPX closed above 4,500. It looks like we may get a gap up tomorrow. We'll see if that gap up is faded. We'll see just how fruitful these legs are, or the legs following Friday's close, and then today's the totality of today. We'll see if it has legs going into the remainder of the week. With a lot of market metrics coming into the week oversold, I'm sure a lot of those will be less so following today's session. But all that to say, we still remain in quite a bit of a wait and see mode, though today and Friday were both positive days. Okay, so with that being said, we'll just take a peek at Apple. We'll talk about the levels to the upside and the downside. We'll talk about how price unfolded today. Let me create session breaks here on this 10-minute chart. So each line that just popped up on your screen, vertical line, denotes or delineates an entire session's price action on this 10-minute time frame. So each price or each candle represents 10 minutes of price. I create the levels for the day trade ideas based on the 10-minute time frame to use as confirmation. So we're looking for candle confirmation above or below, that is a close above or below, to then either put on calls or puts for this week's near the money strike for this week's expiration. So with that being said, I had to be mindful of Apple's slight gap up. Apple was kind of gapping up against the market. So we had set our level to the upside as 171.28. If you look back, that was actually this high on the 18th, which is the highest price has hit. That is the highest point of price since January 18th. Obviously, we do not have that now here today. And then if you look left past it, it clearly had acted as a pivot prior. So when price is above, it attempted to use it as support. When below, it used it as resistance. You can see if you go back even further in time. So that was the idea with setting that today. And then obviously, as you can see, the rest is kind of history. Price, the very first 10-minute candle of the day, tested our trigger, put a wick above, and then the next 10-minute closed above. At which point, you're either putting on a trade or you're waiting for a retest and you pop on a lower time frame. I usually trade on the 5-minute. Today is Monday, so if you wanted to trade on the 10-minute, you certainly could. You 100% could if you're willing to let price work a little bit more than normal because of the proximity or the further distance to Friday's expiration. Time decay or theta is not as big of a worry today. So with that being said, from that 10-minute candle, I'm on the 5 now. So we did get this 10-minute candle above, which also left quite a big wick that tested 172.50. From there, we never got a retest of the 171.28 mark. So if you wanted to get long, you needed to pretty much get long right after that candle or in that candle as price was clearing. Now, if you're watching these charts and you're not so much waiting for the alert in Discord for when price triggers, and if you're paying attention, you may already have the 5-minute on, and you already may see that this is acting really strong with the market. We also had some good volume come in early in the session for Apple that was showing that this move might have been legit. So you certainly can trade these in different ways. You do not have to wait for the 10-minute confirmation, but the 10-minute confirmation is put in place to attempt to weed out any potential false moves. From which point Apple went ahead and hit a few of our targets. As I mentioned, 172.50. It then went through 173.25 and hit just under 173.75, and then based strongly above 172.50 for the rest of the day. So if you put on calls pretty much at the trigger, you maybe rode some up, took some off here on these two high side wicks that didn't look great. But at that point, you're setting your stop at a particular place down, whatever your tolerance is. If you're using the 10-minute, you can, as I always mention, you can use the 8 and the 21 EMA, which price never wavered from pretty much all day until the end of the day where we had some wonky action. You can even do that on the 5-minute if you're being a bit tighter with the position. And as you can see, price really never wavered or didn't waver until here intraday. So all depends on how you want to devise levels. But all I know is, personally, I use this 172.5 mark as my place of, or as my trailing stop, my area of interest once I had gotten long this week's 175. So based on this move, which I was able to do because today is Monday, so the opportunity or the probability that the contract would expire in the money, so referring to delta, is a bit higher than it would be if you bought that far out of the money on, say, Thursday. But all that to say, you really never wavered in terms of worrying about getting out of your position or your trailing stop being hit, because 172.50 held extremely well. There was a point in time here right after noon during lunch where it looked like price was weak. We had a potential double top, a lower high double top. This was the third test of 172.50 within like the first 2 hours, and it looked like price might want to then push lower. At that point, I took my position off, and or the remaining of my position I had trimmed into here, and I looked to get short for a potential loss of this level, and it never lost it, which was really a bullish sign, and at which point price pushed off of it, and you could have at any point gotten long again here, or a new entry there, here, or here. I'm circling the levels at which when price pulled back to 172.50, all of which were good areas to add or to continue to load to an existing position. And then from there, price just drifted higher, finally created a new high, pulled back a little bit at the end of the day, and then closed extremely strong, hitting not only our 174.25 target, but exactly at our 175 target. The high of the day was 175 to the penny. So that'll be a big mark for price to clear tomorrow. But all in all, Apple provided a pretty straightforward trade. We had a nice, so long as you weren't hesitant, and if you were, I certainly understand, because I was hesitant outside of Apple to do this myself. But as long as you weren't hesitant to get long pretty much right away this morning, this was a pretty straightforward trade. Now, if you were hesitant to do that, you still had the opportunity to potentially add on these pullbacks to 172.50, or at the end of the day, if you wanted, on the clearance of the daily high. But all that to say, a pretty decent trade from Apple. SPY, let me go ahead and pop that off. You can see this was the top of a rising wedge that price cleared. Apple, our level to clear was 443. That was really based off of last week. So it wasn't exactly last week's high, but it was right near last week's high. So last week's high was actually 444.03. You can see these two really big wicks, which were on Wednesday. Earlier in the session on Wednesday, price wicked above 443 as well, but it never gave even a 5, that was the 5-minute. It never gave a 5-minute close above, and it certainly never gave a 10-minute close above. So now that we have the 10-minute on, you can see that a bit better. So that was our level to clear to the upside, especially considering kind of where price was going to go ahead and open. And the rest is pretty much history. It followed very similar to Apple, obviously, as you would imagine, because Apple holds so much weight on these indices, specifically the S&P 500. But it did push a bit higher, a bit longer than Apple. Apple took quite a bit intraday of basing, as we just talked about. Here we had a 10-minute close above on a nice igniting candle, a candle that If you're trading, you think to yourself, okay, this is a candle that might not pull back to retest our trigger. Maybe we put on a little bit here and we see what price does. And if we do get the opportunity to get that pullback to our trigger as a retest, then we add more. That is typically how I go about getting into these trades if I'm willing to not wait for the retest initially. To combat that and to worry about, or to not miss a move because you're waiting for a retest but you still want to be in the position, just put on less. Just start with less, and if you get the retest, you can add more. If you don't get the retest, at least you were in some capacity, and now you're in a winning trade. So, I mean, it's a win-win there. Just size on less. You don't have to be immediately fully in the position. You really shouldn't. The idea is always to average up and to not really be fully exposed long right away until you confirm that the trade is working. From which point price hit our 445.50 target right here, left a pretty big 10-minute wick. Obviously, you're probably trading on the 5-minute at this point, so I put on the 5-minute here so you can see. But this is just constructive basing. This is natural rest after if you date back to the end of Friday, about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday to 10:30 today, about 3 hours of price action, SPY moved up 15 points. That's an insane move. So you can only expect some sort of pullback is what you would expect, but at least some sort of consolidation. This is just very constructive consolidation, from which point price went ahead and got back above that current morning high and pushed higher. So hopefully you're prudently scaling out, but at the same time being cognizant of the way price works and how price does not just melt up, just like it doesn't just melt down, though it does melt down faster than it melts up. Or it does move down faster than it moves up. I shouldn't have used melt there, but I think you understand what I'm saying. But from which point you were still in this position, price then went on to push higher, and then slowly just a steady eddy drift higher above 448, which is right around where SPX 4500 is, which is a big level. We had this initial really harsh rejection that was coupled with extremely volatile move to the upside. That trapped a lot of shorts, I would imagine, who got short for that 4,500 projection. I'm raising my hand behind the screen because that was me. Luckily, I was able to take some off and stop myself out and pretty much wash my hands clean, break even on the trade. But that is basically what this did. This trapped a lot of shorts, from which point this false breakdown becomes a buy point, really. This is both false breakdowns and false breakouts provide really good trades to the inverse side of which you would expect to trade, and that's what this happened here. And then price closed really strong above. Did SPY close above 450? No, just below 450, and SPX closed just above 4,500. So we'll see again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if this has legs. But all in all, pretty straightforward trades today from Apple and SPY. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for your support. Have a great night.